Hey everybody, this is Aaron Dean with Learning Through Games. We do a lot of chess classes in different schools, as well as private lessons and summer camps, anytime camps, tournaments, things like that. In fact, we have a tournament coming up in a couple weeks. Today we're looking at the top 30 greatest checkmates of all time. I believe we're at number 23 today. As we go down the list, I have a stack of all the list right here, and we're just counting them down day by day. Now, this one is not my son, who you saw there at the beginning, but an interesting thing about my son is he was born, my youngest son, he was born the same day that Bobby Fischer was. And his nickname is actually Bobby, and that wasn't because of Bobby Fischer. We just kind of thought of it. So anyway, getting back to the countdown. Today we're going to look at something that goes back to when I was really young, and I got a book by Mr. Horowitz. I think it was A.I. Horowitz, I.A. Horowitz. And this was a book called How to Think Ahead in Chess. And I remember the book because it was mostly in descriptive notation, and when I was at this age, they were kind of switching over from descriptive notation to algebraic notation. And kids, algebraic is what we teach in the schools, where you look at a chessboard and you go A, B, C, D. That's algebraic. Descriptive is something different, which that book is written in, which is a great book to have, by the way, How to Think Ahead in Chess. So neat because it had the castle with the guy looking out. And it talks a lot about the Stonewall system. So here's the game that Mr. Horowitz played against kind of an amateur. But I remember the game clearly because it had such a great setup of the Stonewall. The bishop aiming at the king side. This knight, which actually now goes to e5 and pressures a lot of things. If black takes the knight, can you guys guess which pawn would take back? Go ahead and pause the video if you need to. Okay, if you decided the f pawn, you're right, because once you castle like this, then your rook will be open once that file opens. But the person playing black did not take right away. I don't think he took it all. So after knight to e5, queen goes to c7. And then after that, white simply castles. So this is a slow building of an attack that eventually is going to have a spectacular sacrifice that's going to lead to mate. And I remember seeing this as a kid. It's such a neat game. Black plays pawn to b6, and it's white's turn. White plays this great attacking move, pawn to g4. Of course, looking to play pawn to g5. Pawn g4 is a pretty good move. And then black goes ahead and fianchettos the bishop. Now, just like we suspect, g5 is probably coming, but first, white played queen to f3, and then black goes ahead and plays pawn to a6. White was said to have thought a little bit on this move, but he played what we expect, pawn g5, threatening the knight, and the knight goes back to e8. Then, here it comes. Can you guys see the best move here for white? It's a fantastic move. I'll pause the video, or you pause the video, and see if you can think of it. Okay, if you thought queen h5, you weren't quite right. It's aggressive and it threatens mate, but this move works even better. What you want to do is take this bishop on d3 and take that pawn next to the king. Bishop takes h7. King kind of has to take back. If they don't, if they go here, I think the queen would probably come here and get checkmate soon. So the king did take back. Oops. Yeah, let's get that black king. And take back. And then, of course, the next move is queen to h5 check. And the king goes back. Now, I remember as a kid, I really liked this next move also, because this was the first time I saw this technique. It's something you do with a rook. Let's see if you can find the move and know the technique. So kids, go ahead and stop the video and let's see if you think of the move for white here. Okay, if you liked rook to f3, the rook lift, with the idea of coming over here to h3, you were correct. Rook f3 is a fantastic move, of course. And I'm sure in the game, the amateur was quite worried. He played pawn to g6, threatening the queen. And I always tell everybody, if you have to move away from an attack, or you have to move during an attack, try to stay close to the enemy. Try to stay in the attack, which is what black did, or what white did. Queen to h6. Black goes ahead and plays knight g7, and then the rook moves over to h3. Threatening, of course, checkmate here on h7. Now, black actually made it a pretty interesting game. He kind of stayed alive a little bit. He blocks the checkmate by moving his knight to h5. A fantastic sacrifice here, again, for white. Pause the video and see if you can find it. Okay, if you decided that this great knight, the Stonewall knight, had a great use here, you were correct. Knight takes g6. Now notice how the great bishop we had earlier took on h7, and now this knight's being used. But the bad thing about that Stonewall setup is these pieces kind of lay low for a while and don't get used sometimes. So after that, I believe after knight takes, then pawn takes, queen takes check, and of course knight blocks again. White's in pretty good shape, but it's not without a struggle that he wins this game. After that, after the knight blocks, white actually plays a move that may not be the best. He plays rook to h7. He probably should have made another sacrifice. Had he made this sacrifice, this game might be even higher on the list. After this, then I believe it's going to be checkmate pretty soon with queen check. This has to move over, and then you move this down, and they can't get out of the mate here. What an awesome game would have been had he seen that. But it still was pretty great. So the queen goes back here, and instead we got our rook back and comes down to rook to h7. So after that, bishop moves, the black bishop moves here, so the queen's now guarding that. And queen moves over, and now I think he has the idea of moving this pawn down and getting the check here with the rook. So the queen moves over a bit. Black tries to do anything to kind of escape by taking. This may not have been the best move either. I think checking with the rook was best. Instead of taking, checking with the rook, this rook checks right down here. The king comes up, and then checking again here with the queen. Probably would have been just a bit better. But he took here. So after that, rook takes the pawn. Black still trying pretty hard to stay alive. And finally, white gets that move in. Pawn to g6. And rook to g4 check. King moves over. And still we notice this side of the board is not developed. After the king moved over, rook goes ahead and takes this pawn. He kind of has to stop the mate. Takes that pawn. Get the board a little smaller. And of course the only move there is for queen to take this back. Black rook comes over to f8. And then this was considered a very good move. He unleashes the knight, which he kind of has to because these pieces are doing as much as they can. So he brings the knight to f3, and rook takes the knight. But it was considered such a great move because it was a sacrifice, and I bet you know where this bishop's going now. Can you guess? Where would this bishop go? Pause the video if you need to. If you decided adding triple pressure to this, you were correct. And after that, the rook goes back to protect. Three things regarding this, and how can we get a fourth thing, guys, to quadruple pressure on this knight? Where does this rook go? Can you guess? Rook all the way to g1, and they resign. Now, how would this mate have happened? Probably bishop takes knight, and then the bishop moves away and you have check. A spectacular mate. This was a great game that, like I say, I always remembered from when I was a kid, and I definitely knew this had to be high on the list. But I can't wait till you see number 22, because that's just right around the corner. I'll see you guys next time for the greatest checkmates of all time.